The office was heavy with the stale smell of old coffee and damp papers, remnants from our last ordeal. I sat at my desk, fingers tapping against the worn wood, mind racing with fragments of the voices and shadows we'd barely escaped. Kai was across from me, silent, lost in thought. A sudden knock at the door startled both of us, cutting through the silence like a knife. I glanced at Kai, who raised an eyebrow. The door creaked open, and there she was, the woman from before. She was drenched, her clothes clinging to her as if she'd walked through a storm. But it wasn't the rain that had drained the color from her face. It was something deeper, a fear rooted in desperation. She didn't wait for an invitation, stepping inside and looking directly at me. "I know now," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "Your daughter. She's with my Charlie. They're together, trapped, on the other side." My stomach twisted. I felt Kai's gaze on me, but I couldn't look away from her. How do you know about my daughter?" I asked, barely keeping my voice steady. "The voices," she whispered. "They told me. I went back, even after you warned me. The entrance was sealed, but Charlie's friends had maps. There are other ways down there, other paths. And the voices, they're getting louder. They don't just want our children. They want out." Kai finally spoke, his voice low, skeptical. "You're talking about a demon. You think this Crier is a demon?" The woman nodded, gripping her soaked coat tighter around her. "It's ancient. It holds souls captive, feeding on them, growing stronger. If it escapes, it won't stop with them. None of us will be safe." Her words were like ice in my veins. The memories of the voices, the shadows, the face that twisted and shifted in the dark. Everything came flooding back, threatening to drown me. But I pushed it down, focusing on her face. "And you think breaking the seal will free them?" I asked, almost afraid of her answer. She met my gaze, eyes filled with a strange mix of fear and hope. "It's the only way. They're lost, but maybe we can set them free. If we don't, they're doomed to be trapped with that thing forever." Kai crossed his arms, looking between her and me. "This isn't just about your son, is it? You think you're seeing things now?" She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I hear whispers, even when I'm awake, and I know things I shouldn't. About you, Jack. About your daughter. About why you lost her." Her gaze shifted to Kai. "And about you, Kai. Your training, your past. You're both haunted by this, just as much as I am." For a moment the room was silent, the weight of her words settling over us like a shroud. I looked at Kai, and in his eyes I saw the same understanding, the same resolve. We couldn't walk away from this. Not now. Taking a deep breath, I nodded. "All right, we're going back." The woman's eyes filled with gratitude and fear. We were heading into the darkness again, and this time it felt like we were walking willingly into our own graves. Kai and I spent the rest of the day gathering supplies, flashlights, spare batteries, a small toolkit, and an array of protective gear that, though hardly comforting, at least gave us a feeling of preparation. I noticed Kai packing a flare and a few items I didn't recognize, artifacts from his days at the Shaolin monastery, no doubt. The woman had offered to join us, but I insisted she stay behind. Whatever waited in those tunnels wasn't for the unprepared. Kai caught my eye as he slipped a worn charm into his jacket pocket. "Still think this is a demon hunt?" he asked, half smirking. But his eyes betrayed him. The skepticism was gone, replaced by something that resembled belief, or at least caution. "After what we've seen, can you blame me?" I muttered, clipping a flashlight to my belt. "Whatever it is, it's not just shadows and whispers. It's intelligent, calculated, and it's trapped down there with who knows how many souls." He nodded, taking in my words. "If we break that seal, there's no going back, Jack. This isn't just about freeing souls. We're taking on something that's been contained for centuries. I stopped, facing him directly. Do you think we should call this off? Walk away? He glanced away, tension settling in his shoulders. You know I can't walk away from this, but we need a plan. We're not just stepping into the unknown. We're opening a door to something we don't understand. A quiet settled between us, and I glanced back at the door. The woman was standing there, watching us, her face a mask of worry. I felt a pang of responsibility. Her son, my daughter. They were bound to this, to whatever nightmare lay beneath the city. And somehow, so were we. Are you ready? I asked Kai, my voice low. He held my gaze for a long moment, then gave a resolute nod. Let's end this. Together, we took one last look around the room, double-checking our gear. When we were sure we had everything, we stepped outside, leaving the faint comfort of the world above behind us. The evening air was heavy, tinged with the distant rumble of thunder. It felt like a warning. As we approached the tunnel entrance, the woman called out after us. Be careful. The voices, they know you're coming, and they're waiting. I looked back, her words sinking in like a stone. This wasn't just a mission, it was a reckoning. And as we descended into the shadows once more, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to face something beyond either of our darkest fears. The cold hit us first, seeping through our gear as we descended the stone steps into the tunnel entrance. The air was stale, thick with the smell of damp stone and rot. Our flashlights barely cut through the darkness, casting thin beams that seemed to be swallowed by the shadows. Kai's breathing was steady beside me, each step echoing in sync with my own. I could sense his focus, the mental discipline he was drawing on as we plunged deeper. His training was a shield, something I knew he'd rely on before the end. The tunnel opened up into a narrow corridor, the walls marked with those familiar ominous symbols carved deep into the stone. They twisted and turned, forming patterns that seemed to move in the flashlight's beam. It was as if the walls themselves were alive, breathing with the energy of the lost souls trapped within. Jack, Kai murmured, his voice barely audible. Do you feel it? The pressure. It's worse than before. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. The further we went, the heavier the air grew, as if the tunnels were compressing around us. I glanced at Kai, whose face was pale but set in determination. Whatever waited for us at the end of this path, he was ready. We reached a junction, a split in the path marked by a set of fresh scratches on the wall, our first clear sign that someone had been here recently. I turned to Kai, who nodded toward the left path. That's the way the woman marked on her map, he said, keeping his voice low. That's where Charlie and the others were last seen. I took a deep breath, gripping my flashlight tightly. The silence was suffocating, as if the tunnel was holding its breath, waiting for us to make the first move. I could almost feel the weight of the Crier's presence ahead of us, a looming threat that whispered just beyond the edge of hearing. We stepped forward, one careful foot after the other, the darkness pressing closer. The walls felt narrower here, the floor uneven beneath our boots. Every few steps, I thought I heard the faintest trace of a whisper, like a distant sigh. But when I turned, there was nothing, just shadows and stone. Then, as we rounded a bend, the whispers returned, louder this time, murmuring our names, mixing voices we recognized with those we'd never heard before. Jack, Kai, come closer. The voices slithered around us, filling the tunnel with a chorus of ghostly murmurs. I saw Kai tense beside me, his hand clenching into a fist, the discipline he'd learned his only weapon against the sound. I leaned in, my voice barely a whisper. Don't listen to them. They're trying to pull us in, to break us down. Kai nodded, his face steeled with resolve. I know. Let's keep moving. We pressed on, our footsteps barely audible over the whispers. The path was growing steeper, winding downward in a spiral that felt like it would never end. The deeper we went, the colder the air became, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent, clawing at our minds with each step. And then we saw it. At the end of the passage was a door, an ancient iron gate, its surface covered in rust and thick, dark marks that looked disturbingly like dried blood. Symbols were carved into its surface, similar to those on the walls, but deeper, more intricate, as if they'd been etched with purpose. Kai stopped, his breath misting in the cold air. This is it, isn't it? The last barrier before the Crier. I nodded, my heart pounding. We were standing at the threshold of something ancient and powerful, something that had been locked away for centuries. The whispers surged around us, louder now, begging, pleading, warning. Without another word, we stepped forward, placing our hands on the cold iron gate. It groaned under our touch, resisting as if it knew what lay on the other side. But with a final push, we forced it open, the hinges screaming as the gate swung wide, revealing the darkness beyond. And as we stepped through, I felt it, the weight of countless eyes watching us. The silence so deep, it felt like it was pressing down on my soul. We had entered the heart of the Crier's prison, and there was no turning back. As we passed through the iron gate, the air grew thicker, dense with an oppressive silence that seemed to seep into our bones. The darkness in this chamber was different from the tunnels. It was a living, breathing thing, wrapping around us like a smothering cloak. Our flashlights struggled to pierce the blackness, their beams barely reaching the walls of the vast chamber. Symbols covered every surface, larger and more complex than the ones we'd seen before, twisting into intricate shapes that seemed to pulse under the light, as if alive. In the center of the room stood the seal, a massive stone slab, circular and marked with deep grooves, filled with something dark and viscous. The air around it was cold, colder than anything I'd felt before, and the shadows seemed to writhe and shift, as though something beneath the seal was straining to break free. Kai took a step forward, his eyes fixed on the seal, his breath visible in the frigid air. "This is it," he murmured, his voice barely audible, the heart of it all. As we approached, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent, filling the chamber with a chorus of voices, each one pleading, begging for release. "Help us. Let us out. Please." The voices seemed to come from all directions, blending into a cacophony of despair. I could feel them pressing in on my mind, tugging at my thoughts, weakening my resolve. I glanced at Kai, who stood rooted to the spot, his face pale but determined. "This seal," I muttered, reaching out to touch the cold stone. "It's been holding the Crier and all these souls here for centuries, but they're trapped. If we don't do something, they'll never be free." Kai nodded, his gaze unwavering. "And if we release them, the Crier escapes too. It's a risk, but maybe it's the only way to end this." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of our decision pressing down on me. The woman's words echoed in my mind. They're all on the other side, and the Crier wants out. She was right. This wasn't just about freeing the souls. It was about stopping the Crier from consuming anymore. "Are you ready?" I asked, my hand hovering over the seal, feeling its cold energy pulsing against my skin. Kai's expression hardened, his focus sharpening. "I'll keep it at bay as long as I can. Do what you need to do, Jack." I nodded, steeling myself. And then I pressed my hand down on the seal, the cold biting into my skin like frostbite. The instant my hand touched the stone, the chamber came alive. The whispers erupted into screams, filling the air with cries of anguish and fury. The seal began to glow, the symbols around it lighting up in a sickly green hue, illuminating the room with an eerie, pulsating light. The ground trembled beneath us, and the shadows around the seal began to coalesce, forming a shape, a figure rising from the darkness, its body flickering like a dying flame. It was the Crier, its face a hollow void, its eyes two endless pits of darkness. Kai stepped forward, his stance firm, drawing on his mental discipline. He closed his eyes, his breathing slowing as he focused, anchoring himself in reality. I could feel his energy pushing back against the Crier's influence, creating a small bubble of calm around us. The Crier's mouth opened, an impossibly wide maw that stretched into a black void, and a wail erupted, shaking the walls and tearing at my mind. I staggered, fighting to keep my focus, as the sound reverberated through my skull, threatening to pull me under. "Jack!" Kai's voice was steady, a lifeline amidst the chaos. "Focus on the seal. Finish it." I gritted my teeth, pouring all my strength into the task at hand. I traced my fingers along the grooves in the stone, pressing down on each symbol, feeling the energy shift beneath my touch. The seal began to crack, the grooves splintering as the energy within fought to break free. The Crier lunged at us, its form shifting and twisting, arms stretching out like dark tendrils reaching for my throat. But Kai held his ground, his mental discipline radiating outward, pushing the Crier back, forcing it to stay within the boundaries of the seal. "Almost there," I muttered, my hand trembling as I pressed down on the final symbol. The seal's glow intensified, the cracks widening, and with a deafening crack, the stone shattered, releasing a surge of energy that blasted through the chamber. The souls trapped within the seal erupted from the stone, swirling around us in a whirlwind of light and shadow. Their faces appeared in the mist, eyes wide with relief and sorrow, voices filling the air with a mixture of gratitude and pain. But the Crier wasn't done. As the souls ascended, it let out a final, piercing scream, its form stretching and distorting as it tried to break free from the binding energy. Kai faltered, his strength wavering as the Crier pushed back, its darkness swelling, clawing at the remnants of the seal. I felt a surge of fear, realizing that if the Crier escaped, it would consume everything in its path. With a last burst of strength, I reached for the flare in my bag, igniting it and throwing it into the heart of the seal's remains. The light flared up, filling the chamber with a blinding brilliance. The Crier recoiled, its form dissolving into the light, wailing as it was pulled back into the darkness from which it came. The last of the souls rose above us, disappearing into the ether, leaving behind only silence. Kai stumbled back, breathing heavily, his face pale but resolute. We had done it. The souls were free, and the Crier was gone. For now, the chamber lay in silence, the oppressive darkness lifting as the final remnants of the souls faded into nothingness. My breath came in heavy gasps, the weight of what we'd done pressing down on me, but the immediate danger felt gone. Kai and I exchanged a look, a mix of exhaustion and grim satisfaction. We had won, but I knew that this victory came at a price. Whatever we had unleashed here, we might never truly escape. "We need to go," Kai muttered, his voice strained. He didn't need to say more. The seal had shattered, and the air felt unstable, as if the entire underground labyrinth might collapse in on itself at any moment. We turned back toward the path we'd come from, stumbling over broken stones and debris. The tunnel's structure seemed to have weakened, cracks spread along the walls and ceiling, bits of dust and rubble falling around us. I clutched my flashlight, its beam cutting through the lingering shadows as we moved as quickly as we dared. But the silence didn't last long. As we rounded a corner, the ground trembled beneath us, and the whispers returned, a faint echo at first, like a distant memory. But soon they grew louder, closer, overlapping into a cacophony that made my skin crawl. "Kai," I said, barely managing to keep the fear out of my voice, "didn't we take care of it?" Kai's jaw clenched, and he quickened his pace, not looking back. We freed the souls, but the energy left behind, it might not have gone peacefully. Just as he spoke, a figure appeared in the shadows ahead, a hazy form, its shape shifting and flickering, caught somewhere between light and darkness. It wasn't the Crier, but it was something, a remnant, an echo left behind by the destruction of the seal. The figure drifted closer, its face distorted, shifting between different faces, faces of those it had consumed over the centuries. For a split second, I saw my daughter's face flicker in the apparition, her eyes wide with sorrow and recognition. "No," I whispered, feeling a pang of despair. But Kai grabbed my arm, pulling me forward. "It's not her, Jack. Don't let it fool you. Keep moving." We pressed on, ignoring the spectral forms that materialized around us, each one more desperate and distorted than the last. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly, every step feeling like we were sinking deeper rather than escaping. The whispers grew louder, and I could feel them tugging at my thoughts, my memories, each one trying to pull me back into the darkness. Finally, we saw it, the faint glow of daylight filtering through the tunnel's entrance ahead. Freedom was within reach. But just as we neared the exit, the ground beneath us gave a violent shudder, and a section of the tunnel collapsed in a shower of rocks and dust, blocking our path. I staggered back, coughing, shielding my eyes from the debris. "We're trapped!" I shouted, panic rising in my chest. The walls seemed to close in, the air growing thinner, the darkness around us pressing closer. Kai looked around, his gaze steady, calculating. "There has to be another way," he muttered, his eyes scanning the tunnel. He noticed a narrow side passage to our left, partially hidden behind debris. "Come on, this way!" With no other option, we squeezed into the narrow passage, ducking under loose stones and dodging roots that dangled from the ceiling like skeletal fingers. The air was stale, carrying the faint scent of something decaying, but it was our only chance. As we moved deeper into the passage, the whispers followed, growing fainter but still present, a reminder that we were not yet free of this place. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the passage widened, leading us to another exit, a grated doorway with a narrow set of stairs leading up. Kai shoved the grate open, and we scrambled up the stairs, emerging into the open air just as the last rays of daylight slipped below the horizon. We collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath, the cool night air filling our lungs. The tunnel entrance behind us was silent, an ominous void that seemed to watch us, waiting for the right moment to pull us back in. Kai sat beside me, his expression a mix of relief and exhaustion. We'd made it out, but I could see the same thought in his eyes, the Crier, the whispers, the darkness. They weren't gone, not entirely. "I think we closed one door," Kai said, his voice low, "but who knows how many others are left open." I nodded, the weight of his words settling on me. We had freed the souls and defeated the Crier, but we hadn't erased its presence, and I had a feeling that one day it might find its way back. The chill of the night air seeped into my bones as I lay on the damp ground, staring up at the sky. Kai sat beside me, his usual calm exterior hiding the exhaustion and perhaps the fear that I knew lingered just beneath the surface. We were out, but the experience in the tunnels had left its mark, a weight that wouldn't lift so easily. Kai broke the silence, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "We did everything we could. Those souls, they're free now." I nodded slowly, trying to shake the lingering whispers from my mind. "I know, but it doesn't feel over. There's something about that place. It's like a piece of it followed us up here." Kai's gaze shifted to the tunnel entrance, now little more than a shadow in the distance. The Crier may be gone, but whatever bound it to that seal has been broken. We can't say for certain what else might have escaped with it. His words hung in the air, adding to the already thick silence between us. As I mulled over his words, footsteps approached from the shadows. The woman, the mother who had first brought us into this nightmare, emerged, her face pale and drawn, but determined. She seemed less broken than before, a small glint of something akin to peace in her eyes. Did you do it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We did," I replied, my voice catching as I looked at her. "Your son, Charlie. He's free now. He's at peace." She let out a shaky breath, a mixture of relief and sorrow crossing her face. "I know. Somehow I just know." Her gaze shifted between Kai and me, gratitude shining through her exhaustion. "Thank you, both of you. I don't know what you faced down there, but you gave him back to me, even if only in spirit." Kai shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the ground, his hands resting in his lap. For a moment, I thought I saw a hint of regret in his eyes, a reflection of what we'd lost and what we'd found in the depths of that place. "Mom," Kai said, his voice low, "what happened down there? It's best you don't ask too many questions. Just know that your son is safe." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I'll never forget what you've done, but I think I need to find a way to let go. Charlie wouldn't want me to cling to the past." With a final, grateful smile, she turned and walked away, her steps lighter than before. Watching her go, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. We'd given her closure, but the cost had been high, both for us and for whatever lurked beneath London's streets. Kai turned to me, his expression unreadable. "So, Jack, what now? You think this was just a one-time thing? Or do you think it's only the beginning?" I looked back at the tunnel entrance, a sinking feeling in my gut. The crier was gone, but something told me we hadn't seen the last of the supernatural. "We'll deal with it when it comes," I said, my voice steady. "For now, let's get out of here. Go back to the office, get some rest. We deserve it." Kai smirked, giving me a light punch on the shoulder. "Yeah, I think I'll take you up on that." We left the tunnel behind, the whispers fading as we walked away. But even as we returned to the familiar streets of London, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that the darkness we'd encountered had left its mark, and that one day it would call us back. Back in my office, the rain pattered against the window, a familiar sound that usually brought comfort. But tonight, it felt different, like a reminder of the dark places we'd walked through, the voices we'd heard. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the photos I'd pinned to the corkboard, the tunnels, the seal, the hastily carved word, release. Everything we'd uncovered was a puzzle piece, each one more disturbing than the last. Kai sat across from me, his feet up on the desk, arms crossed, eyes half closed. He looked as exhausted as I felt, but there was something else in his gaze, a readiness, an acceptance of whatever lay ahead. "You know," he said quietly, "we might have gotten rid of the crier, but something tells me this isn't the last time we'll face something like it." I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. "I know. There's a whole world of shadows out there, Kai, and I think it's time we stop pretending they don't exist." He nodded, a small smile on his lips. "Well, Jack, looks like we're in this together then. You, me, and the darkness we keep finding ourselves in." I chuckled softly, though the sound held little humor. "Yeah, guess so." Just as I was about to shut my eyes and let the fatigue take over, a faint whisper echoed through the office, a whisper only I could hear. It was soft, barely audible, like a voice slipping through the cracks of my mind. "Jack, come back." My eyes snapped open, my breath hitching. The whisper faded as quickly as it had come, leaving only the steady hum of the city outside. I glanced over at Kai, who hadn't noticed the sound. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized one thing. No matter how many doors we closed, the shadows would always be there, waiting, and I would be ready.